So were there any similar attempts at cultural diplomacy from the Soviet side to the West?
That's an interesting question. Um, in fact, I'll go back before the attempts of cultural diplomacy on either side. Um, when Stalin created the Ministry of Culture in the Soviet Union, he understood the power of culture and art and music. And virtually every classical symphony that was written with the socialist point of view. Every ballet, every film, every recording, because he knew this is how he would help him control the people. Because basically, their mission was to control the mind, the thoughts, and the activities of all their people. And the first American influence that came in, again, long before the government was involved, was when jazz emerged in the 20s and 30s. And it did filter across through radio. You may remember in Germany, Hitler outlawed jazz. And he thought it was an alien form created by blacks and Jews, and so he didn't want any. Stalin allowed it for the first couple of years, and then he outlawed it, and he even went, a few years later, he went so far as to outlaw the saxophone, because in his mind, that elicited sexual interest in people. And so, all of a sudden, every saxophone, and then when that was 1947. So each country, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, etc., had to destroy all their saxophones. And when he died, Khrushchev allowed the saxophone to come back in. So jazz was a big influence. And I've worked a lot with jazz in my career, so I understand its power. So what might have been the difference between jazz and rock music? And I think you will see it with every 13, 14-year-old boy in the world. When they're 12, they listen to teenage children's music. By the time they're 14 and the hormones are raging, when they hear an electric guitar, it makes them rebel, it makes them crazy. And so when the Soviets fought to prohibit rock music, fought to prohibit the electric guitar, to ban it, they had always been successful at intimidating adults. They said, if you continue doing this practice, you'll lose your job as a research scientist. Your children will never go to college. They will be digging ditches. That's the only jobs they can have. And the parents will stop and they'll force their children. But you can't scare a 15-year-old boy. If you tell a 15-year-old boy he can't do something that he loves, he's going to rebel. And they didn't know how to deal with that. And as you can see, they overreacted. Possibly, if they had allowed it to occur, it wouldn't have become such a rebellious weapon, and a youth revolution wouldn't have started. In 1955, you may have had 5 kids behind the Iron Curtain that heard rock music, and then 11 weeks before the Kremlin fell, you had 3 million people at that airfield outside of Moscow. And it only had 2 radio notices that they were going to be there. And all of a sudden, 3 million kids showed up. So it's a phenomena that we felt we had to note, that no historian that we had researched had written about. They gave 4 or 5 other reasons of why they felt the Soviet Union collapsed, but none of them were cultural reasons. And as I spent several hours with the KGB general, and He just wasn't a KGB general. He was the chief of foreign counterintelligence of the Soviet Union. And he says at the end of the film, when you have an opposing power, you have your choice between military or ideological and cultural, and I believe the exact words, and that's precisely what happened here that caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he felt that it was the biggest contributing factor. We don't go that far, we just say it was one of the 4 or 5 major contributing factors. Did I answer your question?